Hello, you're watching Artist Rap, conversations with musicians, artists, and creative people. We will share stories, concepts, life, and music. We hope these unique insights and topics will enrich your day. I'm your host, Ali Jackson.
It's so funky.
Hello, everyone. It's my pleasure to be here to share with you uh, an amazing artist, an individual human being. I've had the honor and the pleasure of being musical colleagues, and more importantly, musical brothers for many years, over 20 years. And it is my honor and pleasure to be able to share some moments with him right now for all of you all to witness his amazing humanity and artistry. He hails from a musical family. Both of his mother and father uh, are musicians, and father was a musician, and he brings such a unique voice and sound to not only his playing, uh, the woodwind instruments, he plays a host of them, and also his musical conception and his connection with people. So, without any further ado, please welcome Mr. Walter Blanding Jr. Hey, Walter, how are you?
Very good, Ali. Thank you so much. What a wonderful introduction. You make me feel really good. I appreciate that. And it's a pleasure to rap with you and share the beauty of music together with all of us.
It's my pleasure, and it's as we say, as you're blessed into this music, and a lot of us learn through apprenticeship. Uh, you have a responsibility to share what the essence of the music that we play. It's called jazz music, but it's far deeper and far more robust and rich. As more like spiritual connection through sound sometimes. So,
Yes.
um, and you are one of the voices definitely of your generation and one of the voices of the history. So, for our listeners or viewers, you have a sound that could be construed as like old school, but it's actually also very new school. So there's a lot of wisdom and feeling in your sound and how you play. We've talked about this for years, myself and other musicians, about your playing, and it's not necessarily predictable. Like you can't, certain people have certain schemes or concepts or etudes, devices, and things that they use, and we all do. It's part of your vocabulary, musical vocabulary. However, for you, once you think you're going to do one thing, you do something completely different. It's unexpected. So that's always really unique and cool. But I wanted to just for our listeners or viewers to talk a little bit about what it meant for you growing up in a musical family and household, and how that had an impact on you playing music, uh, and, and and you could just start there, and however you want to go, but just the influence of your both of your parents being musicians and you playing music at an early age.
Oh, that's a good starting point. Well, as we all know, because you have a similar background as I, appreciation of the arts is essential. And what we're talking about, as we both know, it goes way beyond the scope of music. Music is just a means of understanding ourselves on a profound level. And when it comes to communicating with other people, it's a very useful tool for being able to understand how to navigate through the complications of this world and all the things that it presents. From my memories as a little child, until I left home, coming from a musical family, I remember people used to always say to us, wow, because we were known as the Blanding Family Trio. And we used to play at the Village Gate in New York when we moved to New York and play all around and all these kind of things. And people used to always say, a family that plays together stays together. And it's such a nice statement, but sometimes I would get sick of hearing that. But the beautiful thing is that there's so much truth to it as well, because sharing the music. learning how to play a song together with people, or even just a scale, or learning something new through a profound discipline, any kind of art that is a profound discipline, particularly music, is so useful for all of us because, as I had kind of briefly touched on, these are the kind of things that helps us learn how to communicate with one another, how to express our emotions, how to see things differently, how to look out and think outside of the box. We learn how to use our creativity. Yeah, we learn how to solve problems. And we also learn how to work together with groups of people, even if we all have different opinions, we can still come together and make our ideas become a reality. And essentially, that's what the experience of playing with my family has given me. And I believe in that, and I teach it. And in all of our experiences working with people from all different walks of life, whether they are just beginners in music or whether they play or they're advanced musicians, or even if they're not musicians at all, but just appreciate music, it's so interesting that the experience can all give us something that we can learn from and use in our lives to help make this world a better place. And that's the real value. In fact, that's one of the reasons why I play music now. That experience from my family has given me an appreciation and an understanding of how I can use my gifts and abilities of music to help bring people together. Yeah, so it's really beautiful.
Very, very, very eloquently put, Walter.
Mm, yeah.
Tell me who was someone, not obviously your family had a major influence on your musicianship, but is there or was there one person in particular that challenged you that was like your age or close to your age that inspired you to push you to continue on or like challenged you or you looked up to them, someone like that?
Hmm. You mean like my age? Some of
Yeah,
my
someone closer to your age that was really good that made you go like, "Oh man, this guy's really good, and I need to, I need to get in the shed or I need to
yeah. Well,
practice."
yeah, man. At different points in my life, I've always encountered people at different stages that has given me something to think about and given me inspiration. I think one of the first times that has happened when I was about maybe 10 or 11 years old. When we moved to New York, I was studying with Barry Harris, who's from Detroit. Yeah. And I studied with him on and off for about 9 years. But when I first started studying with him, I met these kids. For me, I would play with my parents. I would practice at home. We would play together. We used to struggle, bro. So we were doing all kinds of gigs and everything, just unheard of things, just to try to make ends meet. And so when I was in school, for some years, I actually wasn't in the school band until I was in high school. So a lot of my friends didn't even know that I played music, at the age of 10, 11, 12, and 13. But when I went to this class with Barry Harris, I found three musicians who were playing jazz and they were just like me. And I was surprised to find other kids my age who could play. And that was one of the first beginning big inspirations of seeing people, my peers who can play. And that was uh, Ari Williams. Remember Ari that played the Ari? Just say Ari. Ari, well, God, there's so many Aris. Ari Colares from Brazil that we played with, but this is Ari, the bass player. William Ash, a guitar player, and
Ari,
Greg
Ari was Ari Cohen.
Ari Cohen. That's right. Ari Cohen on the bass, William Ash on the guitar, and Greg Hutchison on the drums. I met them, and we were just 10, 11, 12, something like that. And I was shocked. I said, wow, I'm not the only one. There's other kids who can play like me. That was a real big inspiration. And that was the first time I noticed that. Since then, throughout my walks of life, in my still young years, if I could say so, there's different times. You've been a big influence on me as well. When we are playing together, it's just such a pleasure to hear and share music and ideas and create something meaningful together with someone who also has a profound understanding of why they're playing music and how can we come together to create something meaningful. That is such a valuable experience. And I've experienced that with you, with Wynton Marsalis, the quintet, um, other musicians that have given me that inspiration at different points in my life. James Carter, I have so much love and respect for that brother. We did our first album together on Tough Young Tenors. And when I heard him play,
Absolutely.
I was like, where is he from? He's from Detroit?
He's from Detroit.
Look at that. Detroit got
Yeah,
some connections, huh?
and he was a huge inspiration to me as a kid because he's a little bit older, but he was somebody that was so talented and so passionate
Mm-hmm.
about music.
Right.
And I wanted to bring this up, not to take it away from you, because we're here to listen to you, but you make a very interesting point. It's about people's passion and identity and search. Sometimes it's not maybe their style,
Mm-hmm.
it's not maybe something that it's your preference, but
Yes.
it's their uh how can I say, their passion for going for something and
Yeah.
reaching for something, and their curiosity for something, which can be extremely inspiring.
Yes.
So, and it could be in different ways, but I just wanted to add that to what you were sharing.
That's so valuable, so special. I can't agree with you more, brother. That's really
Um,
something.
I
That's
wanted to, I wanted to ask you, and
mm-hmm.
this would be interesting for our viewers and listeners.
Yes.
What give me a pivotal moment in your life or career, it could be or both,
Mm-hmm.
that made you reevaluate your direction and which way you were headed. And it could be in your personal life, or it could be in your professional life as a musician. Like uh,
Yeah. I
that,
got
that yeah, that made you go to a place that you didn't realize you could go, or a direction that you didn't realize you could go.
wow. Well, just right off the top of my head, I can count about 4 or 5 special moments that were significant in helping to give me direction. And the most recent has been this virus. Like all of us around the world, this is a game changer for everyone. You know, it makes us all have to learn more about getting deeper in touch with ourselves, learning how important it is for us to reach out and communicate to our friends and family and loved ones, and understanding how important it is to connect to people, being that we are forced to be so distant as a result of this virus, and also reaching out for help as performing artists, that all of us are basically out of work if we are people who perform in public places. It changes everything. So this was the most recent uh, turn of events that has forced me to reach down within myself and look for ways to keep my conviction and try to look forward towards the future, and question, what am I doing and where am I going and how can I continue? And so, and that's a never ending process, for all of us as artists. We're constantly reinventing ourselves and checking ourselves and seeing, what's going on. And I think that's the beauty of what we're doing, and even looking beyond the scope of music, taking that same idea. That's why it's important for us as also as educators to help people to understand when we're teaching and talking about these kind of issues, to not just take things as a truth because someone says, I heard this, I heard that, but to actually think critically. We're lacking critical thinking in this world today. We need people to look at things and question, is that true or is it not? Well, let me see for myself. How did someone come to that conclusion and what do I think about it? Those are the things that help us as a people to advance and to make new discoveries and understand how to change things. So that's a most recent event. Um, gosh, another changing moment in my life uh, that has caused me to look at how things are going is when I moved to New York. Because as a young child, I started playing the saxophone at age 6. For me, like every boy, It's the same thing as a football, a tennis ball, soccer ball, saxophone. Doesn't matter. You're just doing something for fun because children love to play and explore. Only when I moved to New York did I start to see that there's something a little bit more profound about this thing. And when I was starting to get ready to go to high school, I was also very much interested in the visual arts. So I went to the Performing Arts Fame, Fiorello H. LaGuardia High School for Performing Arts, and I could only choose one major. So at that point, I had to decide which direction am I going to go in for high school. Am I going to work on visual arts, or am I going to focus on the music? Fortunately, I made the right choice, I believe, and focused on the music. You know, that was another turning point. And, it's funny how sometimes we find ourselves, they say, behind every cloud is a silver lining. And when I look back on my life and see all the challenges that I've been faced with, it's forced me to kind of reevaluate things and come out on top with a more well rounded perception of what is and how I can be myself.
Wow, Walter. I mean
Mhm.
that I see that optimism and looking forward and being able to navigate challenges or making choices. Those are very significant. How can I say? Those are significant perspectives because to make a choice, you have to have some critical thinking. I think you said that right before we started today. You shared, they say you have to think 5 steps ahead to make one step forward. And
Exactly.
because, every choice you make, there's always a consequence. However, making the choice is the most important thing, making a choice.
Yes.
There is no wrong choice, but once you make a choice, it's like, what is your dedication and what is your um, resolve for that choice? Like, how far are you going to go? And things could not work out. You can make a choice, and that's part of life. However, for musicians, especially someone like you, which I thought was a common thing when people say, okay, when you're young, like I'm going to be a professional musician. So when I was like 8 years old,
Mm-hmm.
I was playing gigs and I played with my father, such as you
Mm-hmm.
play with your family, and you go like, well, I'm going to do this professionally. However, you're just a kid. You have no perspective of the world. But for someone to make a living and support a family as a musician, and not any musician, like a jazz musician or being a real artist and being dedicated to your craft, because I wanted you to actually talk about that. Can you talk about the difference between the requirements, not just for being a jazz musician, but an artist? Because this word artist gets thrown around all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I'm an artist. I'm an artist. What is an artist to you, Walter? What does that
That's a good
require?
question. I'm not even sure what the answer is, but I'll try my best. What is an artist? Good question. I think that that I'm sure everyone has a different opinion, and as we had spoken, that there's no necessarily right or wrong. It's just different sides of a coin. But in my opinion, an artist is someone who is able to use a profound discipline and their creativity to express something that communicates um, something that we can all relate to. It's the best answer I can give. So, taking that a little bit of a step further, um, when we look at things today, if I was to give you an apple and I say to you, here's an orange, and you say, well, okay, here's an orange, I've got an orange. And everybody starts thinking it's an orange because someone incorrectly called it an orange. Does that make it an orange or is it really an apple? It starts to become complicated because of the fact that everybody calls it an orange, even if it's not. There's some truth to it because people are all in the same accord of calling the thing what it isn't. So it kind of becomes an orange, even though the reality is it's not. And so, in that way, that's what's happening with art today. We got so many people who call themselves artists whatever you want to call that, that's cool. But the fact is, what does it take to be an artist? Or you could even take it a step further. What does it take to be a teacher? What does it take to be a banker? What does it take to be a mother or a father? What do you need to do to be any type of a thing that you call something that you are officially whatever that is? It takes study. It takes an understanding of history. It takes an understanding of what role it represents in society. All of those things. And nowadays, when you listen to the majority of music, and I'm not talking about any one particular kind of music, I'm talking about all music, including jazz, all music, all films, all books, all news, our politics, a lot of the things that are happening now, in my opinion, we're kind of lost because we're missing the necessary direction and proper leadership and critical thinking for us to be able to determine what we decide is. We are deciding, so I guess in a way, I guess there's some good to that because we are deciding what is. But a lot of things are missing the substance. Why are we doing this? Is it for money? Is it for fame? Is it for popularity? Is it for why are we doing the things that we do? So when you see someone who says, I'm an artist, or someone who says, I'm an educator, and then like if you study Spanish in college and get a degree and have a doctorate in Spanish, and you can't even count to 10 in Spanish, that's like me giving you an apple and saying it's an orange. In music, to be an artist, it takes years of study, it takes a dedication. It takes critical thinking. It takes an understanding of tradition because we're not reinventing the wheel. It already existed. We're just rearranging it to make something new and creative out of the things that already exist. I know that was a long answer and took us a little bit away from the question, but uh,
It was a perfect answer, and that is a robust answer for a robust or a very loaded question.
mm, hmm
And that was, I always like to say that someone who lives what they do is very different than someone that punches a clock for what they do.
hmm
When we practice music, it's not like, okay, uh, I'm done. I work from 9 to 5. For us, it's like you practice as much as you have to practice to get what you have to get or to present it. There's no time limit. It could take you 5 minutes or it could take you 5 years.
that's true. I agree. I agree so much.
And maybe, and it's a way of life. Like we've talked about this for many years with many older musicians, and the musicians that are, you know, a lot of them now are passing on. They're becoming our ancestors, but we've had access to them, and it was more of a way of life and a hands-on community type of process of being an artist. It's like an apprenticeship and a lifestyle. And you would sit in on rehearsals and you would go see cats play. And no one gave you a lesson and no one spelled it out like you need to do this, this, and this to be, and then you arrive.
Hmm
So the model of sometimes I think uh, the Western institution, like studying music, all of the great musicians generally didn't go to any music school or conservatory or anything like that. They were in the practice of doing it, just like a lawyer or a scientist or any one of those disciplines. They're in the practice of.
hmm
I practice law, or I practice medicine. I practice. It's like for us, that's all we do. So the equivalent degree of somebody who does this for many years and on a high level, and then people say, what is a high level? So I consider you on an extremely high level just by the years of dedication and the body of work that you've accumulated over the years.
hmm
So that and that that demonstrates your not only dedication, the quality of your work and your passion and the level of your artistry. Back to
hmm
that word artistry
Yes.
because of your dedication.
Wow.
And
That
if you break
I
it
mean,
down.
yeah, that makes me think of a. You're bringing up such a very interesting thing because you know, um, when people go to school, and you have trains, schools of thought, even, that's useful. So why are we studying? It's the tools that the institution is helpful in the sense that it gives you the tools that you can use for further development. I think that what we need to help us all to better acquire is an understanding of how we can use those tools to produce something meaningful.
Absolutely.
So yeah, like an artist could, or any type of subject. In this case, we're talking about music. So an artist will study, and they get all the technique down. They get the scales. They study the books. They know the history through school, and they're playing in groups, and they're doing all the right moves. But if you're not really thinking about what does this mean to me, and how can I contribute to make a difference, then I think the point is lost. A lot of us, and that's unfortunately sometimes I speak to people who maybe never heard a jazz concert, or they might not even know what jazz is. And some people say to me, "I don't like jazz," and it's okay. That's cool. That's cool. You don't have to. It's complicated. Hmm, okay. Well, what have you listened to? And then you find out that they're listening to some things that doesn't really represent the best of what the music is. So of
It's
course,
it's the oranges that you said that are actually apples that
yeah,
people have
man,
said.
they're having a bad experience. No wonder I wouldn't like it either if I heard that mess. You know. So what are we looking for? We're looking for the things that you could say even if you're not a musician. Oh, I like that song. It's got a beautiful melody. Or this makes me feel like XYZ. Or when I hear Kind of Blue, I remember it, it brings you back to memories and things that you can relate to. And so that's important for us as artists, and when we're educating the younger generation and people to understand, to put meaning behind what you're doing is what makes the difference. It's like when you're watching a movie and you can see the actor is just reciting lines like they're reading from a book. It doesn't really convince you of the story or the character, and you kind of feel a little bit disconnected from the vibe of what the purpose is. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Walter.
Hmm.
Give can you share with our viewers or listeners now? I know you've been on the road for I don't know how many. I don't want to put numbers out there that are crazy, and but for let's say over 20 years, 25 years, and what road experiences or travels were significant, or memories or stories that came out of these travels or experiences uh, that that were memorable to you, musically or personally or whatever.
Wow. Gosh, there's so many. We don't have that much time. I better just pick one. Yeah. um, I'll tell you one story. It was very interesting. It was when I was in at the New School for Social Research. I was dirt poor. We were so poor. We didn't have any money, and my parents had separated, so I was kind of on my own, and we were working with a serious disadvantage. And I basically put myself through school and trying to figure out just picking up the pieces, like many people have done. And so, one particular moment that was the beginning of my career touring, um, I had a saxophone that was held together with glue and rubber bands and tape and stuff, and it was just it was the best I could do. And so we had a fundraiser at the school, and someone who was organizing the fundraiser had reached out to the host of the fundraiser and asked if they would be interested in helping to buy an instrument for one of the students who was in need. And unbeknownst to me, Bill Cosby and Cab Calloway had gotten together and purchased me a decent saxophone. And so that was my first instrument. And as a result, they both gave me just a little push, which was the kind of help that I needed They both hired me for work after that. So it was my first time leaving the country. I toured Europe with Cab Calloway, and I appeared on the Cosby Show, and that experience taught me a lot of things. One thing that it showed me was that there's always hope, and also there are people who care. And believe it or not, it's just so important to share and to give. Not that you're expecting to receive when you give, but just to give for the sense of uplifting us all, you know? And that's what they did. And it's the thing that helped to put my life in a different direction and make me understand I can do this. It's just the right thing. So we went on tour, and for the first time, I got to see Italy and France and Germany and all types of countries and peoples. And the band was so nice, and it was just a wonderful experience. That was an unforgettable moment for me. I will never forget the things I learned. And so Cab Calloway, this dude, now here I am, like 18 years old, and he's like 85 or something. This guy was the epitome of class and dignity. My man would wear a three-piece suit with a tie stud, cufflinks, and spats just for the bus ride to the airport. That's how he was. He rolled that way constantly and was consistent and didn't speak too much. But as you know from watching those old films and stuff, he had a big voice, just an incredible voice and personality. And that's one experience I'll never forget. Really special.
That's a great one to share, Walter. That's so awesome, and it's very representative of the sentiments that people should have today in consideration of our pandemic and in consideration of the oppression that many people have received over time. Not just Black people, but if you go in the world, there's people that are being oppressed at this very moment. That those voices aren't heard, and your story epitomizes the great things about the human spirit. So that's a great one to share. Um, are there? Could you give like a practicing tip for like young musicians or musicians starting out? Like, what is your practicing uh, like one or two principles that they should always have in mind when practicing?
Yeah, I'll give you two really good ones. The first one is have a purpose in mind. So if your teacher is telling you, for example, I want you to practice the C major scale for tomorrow, and you say, okay, my teacher taught me to practice the C major scale, and you practicing for 8 hours, and you're going do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. That's cool. That's good. A more effective way would be to consider how is this going to help me? How can I take what my teacher said so that I can help myself take it to the next level? Right? Not just an instruction, but how can I use this that I can play better? So I've heard so many students they'll do what their teacher is instructing them or what they understand that they should probably do to improve themselves, and it sounds like it's just something that they're repeating as opposed to saying, okay, I'm practicing now. I have to play my C major scale. How would I play that scale as if I'm standing in Madison Square Garden? There's 20,000 people that came. My grandma and everybody's there. They're taking pictures. They've got the little Google, what do you call those, binoculars and everything. And they paid money to hear me play this, to hear me play my C major scale, and they're not playing. How would you practice it then? That's how you have to always practice. Be for real, right? And try to figure out how to achieve an objective. Now, you don't have to do much. If you're practicing 8 hours a day, some people they practice a lot, and then when you hear them play, you say, "My God, man, what you been doing for 8 hours? It doesn't quite. I'm not sure, but don't sound like. Are you getting the most out of your time? Quantity does not equal quality. If you take a small bit of something and really focus, turn off the television, don't be text messaging, and just concentrate on the goal. The goal is I want to play evenly. I want to play well. I want to look good when I play. I want to sound good when I play. I want it to sound like a song. You can play a scale like that. You can play your teacher's exercises. I don't care what it is. Everything you play that way. When you play a song, many of us forget the melody. Man, that's the most important thing, right? So my two very important points I'll repeat again because it's worth repeating. Have an objective in mind, even if it's a simple thing. Today, I'm going to work on trying to play that low B flat better. Enough. Just focus on that. As opposed to today, I'm going to play like John Coltrane. You won't. Right? So that's the one thing. And the other thing that I would really give as a very helpful advice to all of us who are students of this music is to understand um, why you're doing what you're doing. And it doesn't have to be a deep thing. It can be, but it can also be very simple. I want to be able to play Happy Birthday for my sister. That's an objective, right? I want to be able to sound like whatever it is that I'm imagining. I want to sound beautiful. I want to sound. How can I use my the things that I'm working on to express my emotion? Just simple things, a goal in mind and an objective, and why am I doing what I'm doing? That is, if you keep your focus on that, it will help a lot. And I'll add one more thing. All of us always need suggestions and coaching every now and then, no matter what your level is. If you're a beginner, you might need more coaching than someone who might be more advanced. But even the best of us still are learning and getting advice from people who can help us how to be better. And that's important.
Thank you, Walter.
Yeah, yeah,
This is
brother.
awesome. Um, do you have a perspective on, you know, or the most significant thing you find in improvisation? This is for people or playing. What is your perspective on improvisation?
I'll share with you a story that I think you were with me when we were touring, and we were watching Wayne Shorter, that we all know very well. We've done recordings with him and performed with him several times. And in this particular tour, we were with we were playing either before or after Wayne Shorter. I can't remember which one. And so we're backstage hanging out with Danilo, and he told us something I'll never forget. It was really deep. He said, I don't know how we jumped on this subject, but we were all together talking, and he said, you know what's interesting? Wayne Shorter he's a true improviser. He said something like that, and I don't remember the word he used, but we said to him, well, what do you mean? Why you say that? And he said, well, for example, if we're doing a sound check and we're playing a song, and you play something, he's paying attention. Now, if we play that song again and he hears you play that same thing again, he'll stop and he'll say, don't do that. So it's like being spontaneous, truly spontaneous and fresh. That's a real good example of improvisation at its best. We all have plans. It's just like me speaking now. We're speaking, music is a language, right? So I don't really know what I'm going to say, but I kind of have an idea, and we know the subject of this conversation. We have certain points that we want to cover, but it's not like this was all written out and I'm reading from something that I prepared for you. So if we were to have this same conversation tomorrow, even if we have the same points, the conversation will never be exactly the same. That's what improvisation is.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
It's very true. I think Danilo also added another story, but we won't get into it. I'll get Danilo on here for him to share that story. But
Yeah.
it's always about that how you look at things and are you always in the moment. So all of the preparation is always for the moment. We do all of this studying and practicing and being proficient on your instrument and your sound and all of those things to be present only in the moment. And the moment is only when the moment is.
Yes.
And all of what happened before has nothing to do with the right in this moment.
That's right, bro. Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. We
as
really.
a as a drummer or percussionist or timekeeper, because that's a big part of the function. people just go like, oh yeah, you're doing the same thing over and over again. It's just like it, but each note is new. Every note is a new note, and you have to approach it as such because that's where the feeling of the music comes from. If I just was like, oh, I'm just doing the same thing, ding, 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 whatever, whatever, and I have that attitude, it's gonna sound like that.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, are you playing the same or riff, the same repetitive part? What made Count Basie's orchestra or people in that, especially in that generation, is every time they played the riff, it had more power in it. It had more intention in it, and it was more belief in it. So, kind of in line with what you're saying is, in where Wayne in that concept is like, be new in the moment because the moment is new.
Yes. Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
I wanted to ask you, what makes a good solo?
Huh. Wow.
What is a good solo?
Yeah. Well,
I didn't
I
mean to.
think
I
if
don't
you
mean to go crazy at these
no, that,
crazy questions.
no, that's beautiful. You know, I was thinking of two things simultaneously, and I guess they both exist. And so depends on what I think you like. I'll give you the example of what my preference is, but I have to mention the other part because it exists just as much as what I prefer. It doesn't mean just because I don't prefer it that it's not good. It is also valid. I prefer a good solo that has some type of a theme or development that is logical, that has meaning. Just like a sentence. If I say, today is a beautiful day, it would sound strange if I say my shoe was untied. That, although I can say that because of freedom of speech, but it might be better if I say the sun is shining, because that's kind of related to how today's a beautiful day. When you listen to music and you hear something like pa 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 pam, pa 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 pam, pa 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 pa, the whole song is that theme. Pa 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 pam pam pa. And you say, okay, he's gonna take it to the bridge. No, pa 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 pa. It's like wow, so much you can do with just one little theme and variation. It's so good, and it helps people to follow your train of thought. Beautiful. On the other hand, people can say it's a beautiful day, my shoe is untied, because it's art and it's a freedom of expression. That's not, it's valid, you know. And so it might make some people think differently. They might say, wow, I like that because it's disconnected, you know. That's just, I prefer that less personally. It's harder for me to connect.
That's brilliant. And do you have a reason why
Hmm.
you prefer the first way or thematic way of evolving a solo or a spontaneous improvisation versus the other way? Is there a reason why you you prefer one over the other?
Yeah, because for me, the first way, by using some kind of a theme and variation or the type of logic that to me seems like it makes me feel good. It makes me feel comfortable. Even if I feel uncomfortable, I can still follow through that story to get to a place where there is a resolution. Whether the resolution is bad or good or uncomfortable or comfortable or consonant or dissonant, doesn't matter. I'm still being led through a story that I can follow that has some structure that I can understand. And that's why I like that. On the other hand, a more abstract uh, construction of a solo I can appreciate, but for a shorter period of time because at some point, for me personally, I find it hard to concentrate. I find it hard to understand what is the story and where is it going.
Do you feel like musicians, uh, like, what constitutes a master uh, musician? What constitutes someone who has mastery on their instrument, uh, as a player and an improviser, or just a complete musician? What does that look like?
That's a deep question, Ali. What constitute mastery? Oh, you know, I actually don't know. You know, I think a master is able to communicate something that allows a freedom of expression, or I'm not even sure if I should say that, but they're able to communicate something that is expressive of the moment, of their intention. I guess mastery would be considered that you are executing your intent 100%.
Wow, that's a very concise way of defining that.
Yeah, that's a hard question.
Well, it
you
gets
know.
used it gets used very loosely.
Mhm.
In this is just thoughts that I always have, with my own personal outlook, because you only have control over your own personal perspective. And in our studies, as musicians, we look at people that we deem as masters because they're, like Thelonious Monk says, what did he say? A genius is one who is most like himself.
Yes. But let me ask you a question. Like, for example, I know this sounds crazy, but if we look at someone like Thelonious Monk, right? He's unique. He's most like himself. He's expressing his intent 100%. He's communicating. He's creating something new. He's a master. He's got years of experience. You can hear tradition. You can hear new. Okay. So, what about someone who might not have all of that experience, but even to their limited capability, they're still expressing themselves completely? So, what is the difference? How could we describe one as a master and one as not?
Well, in the case of Thelonious Monk, there's no music that sounded like his before him, and there's no music that really sounds like his after him.
Mm.
And that's from a compositional perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And for any masters that we would deem in our music, in jazz music, because I feel like jazz music, in the pantheon of music, there's more that's required to play the music well. There's more study, there's more science. Because people look at jazz, oh, you play what you want. It's like, yeah, you do, but there's a lot of rules also attached to that.
Right.
Do whatever you want. But like you said, there's a logic and a science behind the freedom.
Mm-hmm.
So with Thelonious Monk, yes, he's a master from the context that he's developed a framework in which he also played inside of and created a vocabulary and a language that's unique into the compositions that he wrote, or the compositions that he played, and he got musicians that fit inside of the construct of the compositions that he played.
Mm.
So it's like a platform. He created a platform uh, that used his vocabulary and elements of a tradition that came before him. So
Right.
he did not invent swinging.
Right.
However, his music swung, and he didn't invent harmony. However, his harmony and the voicings and the way that he played is extremely unique, and it was never before heard. And another interesting thing about Thelonious Monk for me is he was somewhat embraced by the older musicians of the swing era or before him, and the modern musicians that were beboppers and the ones that were in between. So, and they all played his music or his compositions.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and if we really look at it too, most of Monk's compositions, if you played them all back to back, it would be just one big composition. So I don't. And if we listen to him as a master improviser on his tunes, and he played standards as well, of not only his own compositions, but he played standards. But his approach to those standards was extremely unique, but it was never illogical. So there's always a logic. And I feel like to be a master, you have to be a master of certain logic in another idiom, like mastering one or two other styles to then say, okay, now this is my style.
Yes.
It's like a martial artist.
Hmm.
It's like, the baddest cats, okay, they grew up in one style and then they learned another style.
That's right.
So you could be a master of one style. And I think it also has to do with you spending a lot of time in one idiom and really knowing that idiom, knowing that logic. Like you studying with a grandmaster like Barry Harris, learning the language of bebop, and then taking that language and then maybe going away from it, but learning the language is the most important thing, so you understand the logic and the rules of something, and then saying, okay, I understand that. Now, how do I apply it with this, or cross pollinating that language with another language? And
That's
you and that brings me to my next question for you, Walter. And I don't know if I answered what is a master, but
right.
I wanted to at least, because you asked me, normally I ask the questions here.
Mhm.
Um, the next question is,
Yeah.
you're someone that speaks multiple languages and is very adept to other cultures, and you've lived abroad. I know you've lived in Israel, you've lived in Italy. Most recently, you lived in China, in uh, Shanghai. And I wanted to ask you, how has music, or learning the languages, the many languages of jazz music, and you could specifically name the ones that you are most inspired and influenced by.
Mhm.
How is it learning the language of music influenced you in learning other languages, spoken languages,
Oh.
in the world, and vice versa?
Hmm. Hmm. Well, fortunately, because I play saxophone, um, I don't have to necessarily play words. Although that is an interesting concept, why not? You know, but usually I'm playing tones and different textures. Um, so languages like Italian, Hebrew, Spanish, Chinese, those languages also have their modes of communication, even if we pretend like it has no meaning. If a person comes just born yesterday and there is no language and they see something and they say, you know, well, now it has a meaning because it sounds like, whether it's phone or fist, whatever it is, now you're creating a language. And so it's interesting to see how one thing that I noticed that's in common with all of those languages is that, so one of them is a Romance language, it's Italian, and so is Spanish. Hebrew is a Semitic language, it's not a Romance language, and Chinese is a God, it's a world of its own. All of those languages, even with their different structures and roots, they still have a lot of things in common, which we can find in music. We're taking the building blocks of making sound and using them to logically create expression. It's just like when we talk about do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, right? We use that scale, we'll make a song. Do, a deer, a female deer. Thank God for the sound of music. Right? And so language is the same way. You've got verbs, you've got conjugation of verbs if I'm speaking to him or her, or if it's the past tense or the future. All the languages have pretty much this kind of thing. Some languages don't, but they have other rules that are very similar. So that's part of the reason why I find myself so interested in different languages, because also it's culturally different ways of expression. So we're using these different things, but the common thread that we all have throughout all humanity, no matter what the culture or language is or even style of music, everybody wants to have fun on Friday, Saturday. Everybody wants to be loved. Everybody wants to be understood. Everybody wants to eat. Everybody wants to stay warm. Those kind of things are the common things that we find even in the music. That's why I love the thing about jazz. That's an American folk music that comes from the blues. And interestingly enough, why we call it folk music, because it's a music of folks. And just like any kind of cultural folk music all over the planet, if you listen to that, it's got something sounds almost kind of bluesish anyway, because the stories are the same. It's the common people that have that struggle of, trying to deal with the things in life. And that's the beauty, I think, that I find the connection between that and the different languages, the way people communicate, and music. And it opens up my mind to be open to hear other perspectives and other cultures and how I can add that to my culture. Let's say, okay, I'm a Westerner. I'm American, I'm an African American, I'm all these different things. And then I go somewhere where everybody's not like me. And I say, wow, well, they are this. They are Chinese, they are Italian, they're Israeli, they're Palestinian, they're Arabic, they're Jewish. They have all these different cultures and histories that is so beautiful and different from mine. And I can take that and relate to it and then bring it back into my culture. That's what we do in jazz. That's why jazz is always growing and developing, because it's a combination of all these cultures and all around the world, just like America.
Wow, sir. Wow. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Well, on a closing note, um, I'd like to get your perspective on the status of music pre-coronavirus, like maybe could be global or New York City, and your feeling on how acoustic music and folk music, as you eloquently stated, what are the states of that music and why? What is the state of group musics in the world? Uh, and it could be from a locale perspective, and why are they in the state that they are in? And this is all pre the pandemic, because after the pandemic everything has changed. This like that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah. Well, you know, gosh, I'm only, how old am I? I'm only 48. Okay. And so I think one of the common mistakes that we all make as humans is to assume that at this moment we are at the height of our wisdom and technological and historical abilities. This point now is the maximum. We have grown to this point and we know the most than anything that has happened before. I disagree with this. I believe that we are in continuous cycles throughout the thousands of hundreds of thousands of years. And as those cycles continue, sometimes we forget. We might have forgotten 4 years ago, right? Now, here we are in a situation where we've got technology. We have an understanding of a lot of things that we seem to have not understood 100 years ago. However, where has that brought us? Are we better off now than we were 100 years ago? In some respects, we are. We're making advances in science and technology and medicine. We're exploring our universe. We're exploring the depths of the ocean and how far is space taking us to God knows where. However, we still forget how to treat each other well. Gosh, right? We're still forgetting how to take care of our planet and not pollute so that we're destroying and killing ourselves, right? We still forget how to take care of our citizens and be responsible part of society so we don't have so many of our homeless brothers and sisters starving because they might not have some of the means that others have. We are still selfish. That has been going on for thousands of years. So, with all of our technology and ability, where are we really? We're still following that same cycle that goes back and forth. We forgot what happened 20,000 years ago, right? So, how can we think we're so advanced? Now, I kind of forgot your question, but it doesn't matter. That is the answer, right? So, what were
Yeah,
you asking?
it's yeah. Well, the question is, it's all relative, because that's a global perspective of the question. The question is, what is the state of music for folk music and of people?
Right.
So
Yeah, the
folk
state of
music of the
music.
people. Yeah.
We're in the same situation with music. We forgot about all those beautiful folk songs that come from our grandparents, no matter where we're from, whether you're Irish or African American or whatever kind of American slash hyphen, whatever it is, your peoples have a history. And that's important to, to take pride in that and keep that tradition along with the modern things that you are learning as we all go along in this world. We're forgetting that. We're kind of throwing that away as if we reinvent the wheel. You know, that's what I think. And it's up to us to take more responsibility to try to keep that and continue.
Thank you, Walter.
Yeah, brother.
Yes, sir. Um, just as on a last note, like politically speaking, I mean, you basically summed it up in the first explanation on this topic. You know, um, where do you see America going after all of these protests that we see over the, George Floyd's murder by the hands of law enforcement? Is obviously lit a fire, was the straw that breaks the camel's back on people just tolerating this senselessness.
Yeah.
So what do you see coming out of this, and what would you like to see come out of the protest of
Yeah, it's so unfortunate. I'm hoping that we can learn. For many of us, this is not something new. But due to the advancements in our ability to communicate worldwide through social media, it's becoming more clear to many people at a faster rate because incidents like this can be seen and heard and understood quickly. But this has been happening for hundreds of years. And so I'm hoping that, racism is a problem that involves everybody. And we have to understand how to take pride in the beauty of our differences as well as the things we have in common. There's nothing wrong with black pride, white pride, whatever kind of pride you got. That's who you are. But don't forget, you're not alone. We all together make this planet. So I'm hoping that these kind of experiences will help us all to educate one another to understand how to work together. Anger is a real emotion and it can't be forgotten or pretend like people shouldn't be upset. A lot of people are upset about what happened, and so am I. But we have responsibility as well to figure out how to be socially responsible, how to take care of ourselves and each other. So, if someone does you wrong and you want to do wrong back, might feel good at the moment, but in the long run, it might hurt us a little bit more than help. And so I'm hoping what I want to see from this experience is for us to try to get to a more um, even state of consciousness and awareness of how America, as being a victim of racism for so many years, that we can try to see things for what it really is and talk about it for what it really is. We should start to have communities come together and have meetings with the police and with the community, the poor communities. People should be able to talk together about these things, not separately. You know, we should have activities that bring us together. A softball game with the police versus, I don't know, the community soccer team or something. Well, maybe not soccer, they would win because they're professional athletes, but we need to have some kind of an understanding of how to speak frankly about what's going on. And every time somebody mentions the word black or white or something, everybody gets scared. We want to be politically correct. Oh, don't say that. How could you? Well, that's the reality of what we're dealing with. You know. So I hope that we can come together and be a little bit more real about what's going on and find valuable solutions that help the society and help us all together. You know, and we need to educate one another. You know, There's all kinds of different solutions that can happen, and I hope we start to find some of those.
I understand. Uh, Walter, I want to thank you again for sharing some time, and for our audience. Thank you all for tuning in, and I hope this was uh, a good experience for you and to shed some light on captioning just a little bit around the humanity and the artistry of Walter Blanding. And so thank you very much, Walter, and we hope that all of what you share will resonate and will uplift our planet and uplift the people of our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Ali. Thank you so
So
much, everyone.
funky.